This is the news that we are waking up to for Friday, Good Friday. Happy Easter, everybody, and happy 420 for those in the United States. It's weird being in Europe for 420 because, they write the date differently over here. They do day, month, year. So it's 24. It doesn't mean anything to that community here. So I'm all alone in celebrating 420 in Kyiv. Anyway, it's Friday, April 18th. It is Good Friday. And so I do want to wish everybody a very happy Easter and Passover for those of you celebrating those holidays. It is day 1150 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And I'm Peter Alexievich. Now, last night was not a loud night here in Kyiv, but across the country, we saw terrible devastation. Even though the number of drones was very small last night and the interception rate was very high, 90%, 89.2% interception rate on the drones. Only 4 of them got through, but 3 of the 6 missiles got through, 50% interception rate, which is a good interception rate on these ballistic and cruise missiles that were sent last night. But there is no doubt in my mind that the devastating attacks that we've seen today in just the last 16 hours on Sumy, Kharkiv, Kherson, Mykolaiv, Odessa, and Dnipro, in which 11 people were unalived and over 150 were injured, many of them children, is only a prelude to what's coming this weekend. The Lithuanian foreign minister has warned us, the Zelensky government has warned us to expect more attacks against civilian targets. And it is worth pointing out, it's worth remembering that the Russians are using cluster munitions and double tap strategies against civilians here, all of which are war crimes of the worst sort. So again, good interception rate last night, but it's just a prelude of the devastation I expect is coming, or the Russians have planned for this weekend. Peskov has said the 1-month moratorium on strikes against energy infrastructure in Ukraine has expired, but Vladimir Putin hasn't issued any new orders. We are waiting to see what the Russians will do. One can expect that over the weekend, we're going to have blackouts. We're going to see energy infrastructure targeted again. We're going to see all-out attacks against civilian infrastructure. Not that the Russians stopped, right? I mean, come on. They didn't stop. The Ukrainians, to the best of my knowledge, did stop hitting energy infrastructure. We haven't seen an oil depot or an oil refinery hit in 30 days. Now, I confess, I am hopeful that the Ukrainians have been saving up drones, making their plans, gathering intelligence, and we're going to see some oil infrastructure hit this weekend. The Ukrainians have been incredibly restrained about hitting export pipelines and export oil infrastructure in order to maintain the global price of oil. They don't have to have that concern anymore. With Trump's tariffs, the world is headed toward global recession. Everybody knows it, and the oil price is collapsing. So we can afford to take, right now is the time to take Russian oil off the market as much as possible and starve the Kremlin of those dollars that they so desperately need to continue this genocide in Ukraine. The United States is finally facing the reality of what's happening here in Ukraine. In some ways. So the civilized world is waiting to see if Russia is serious about peace, says the U.S. team after meeting with the Ukrainian delegation in Paris. What I think really happened at this meeting was that the Ukrainians, along with their European allies, looked the Americans in the eye and said, we're not giving up 20% of Ukraine and rewarding Russian aggression, which is what Witkoff wants Ukraine to do, right? And has advised the president that if Ukraine just surrenders 20% of its territory, if it just dooms 4 million Ukrainians to a life as second-class citizens under the servitude of the Kremlin, Everything will be fine. It'll be great. So much so is the U.S. faced with the reality, finally, of its situation, that the U.S. is talking about walking away from peace negotiations, and Trump is saying that Ukraine isn't that important. Right? After months of talking about he's failed. He knows he's failed. These guys don't have, it's too hard. Peace is too hard. It's too complicated. I can't just bully everybody into giving me what I want. It's like democracy. Not our war, says the U.S. Secretary of State. Unbelievable, unconscionable. Secretary Rubio warns that the U.S. is ready to move on, right? Because they're not getting their pockets lined the way that they wanted. They're not being shown to the world as great peacemakers. That this is all too hard. It might take months to work something out. Well, they don't have the attention span for that, these jackasses. It's so embarrassing being an American these days. All right, let's hear what Tangerine Palpatine had to say here. Make sure you've taken your blood pressure medication first.
And I don't hold Zelensky responsible.
Whoops, sorry. One reasonable thing finally out of this bastard's mouth. He doesn't hold Zelensky responsible. Although he went on to insult him greatly and say he wasn't a fan of Zelensky's and he thinks Zelensky somehow is responsible for this war. Why? Because he didn't just roll over like a victim and give the aggressor what they wanted. He fought for a just peace, a just resolution, and the freedom for all Ukrainians, especially those trapped inside of the nightmare of the temporarily occupied territories.
And I don't hold Zelensky responsible, but I'm not exactly thrilled with the fact that that war started. That was a war that would have never started if I were president. You'd have millions of people living right now that are dead. You'd have cities that would be open and thriving and they'd have their beautiful turrets. Those turrets are the most beautiful in the world, but they're not with us any longer. They're smashed to smithereens, laying on the ground in a million pieces, getting hit by rockets, bombs, and bullets. And so I'm not happy with him, and I'm not happy with anybody involved. I think it's a war. I know it's a war. It didn't happen for 4 years. It was never close to happening. It was never even a thought. And I spoke to President Putin about it a lot. It was the apple of his eye, but there's no way he would have ever gone in if I were president. Now I'm trying to get him to stop.
Okay, so he says two things there that are correct, or at least on the right track. He doesn't blame Zelensky for starting the war, and he's trying to get Putin to stop. Okay, fine. Turrets? I assume he's talking about the onion domes on top of Orthodox churches. I guess that's what he's calling a turret. But he's so far removed from reality, this guy. The idea that he blames Zelensky for anything, when we know full well that it was the Russians who started this war, that this is the Russian war of aggression. The transactional nature of this administration is so deeply flawed that one can call it evil without overstating the situation, in my opinion. Now, on the subject of evil and the extortion of Donald Trump of the Ukrainian people, Ukraine and the United States have signed a memorandum confirming their intention to finalize and conclude an agreement on mineral resources, according to Ukraine's energy minister. Now, negotiations are supposed to continue after the Easter break, starting again on April 24th, concluding on April 26th. So nothing is confirmed yet. The outline, the framework for a deal is close to being agreed upon, I believe, is what this is saying. Where we go from there is another story. In recent days, the White House has become less unreasonable about their demands, demanding only $100 billion in exchange for the mineral rights. So we'll see what happens. Or as repayment, pardon me, not in exchange for the mineral rights, but rather $100 billion to pay back what was granted under the Biden administration, which Ukraine has no debt to the United States. But they're going to squeeze $100 billion out of them anyway, because that's what you do when you see a man drowning. You steal his fucking watch. I swear to God. On the absolute other side of the spectrum are the men and the women of the Atesh group. This is a partisan group who continues to be very active in the temporarily occupied territories, and I cannot tell you how much respect I have for these folks. These folks operate every day behind enemy lines and put themselves at risk to sabotage equipment of the invader and to get information to the Ukrainian armed forces to help repel the invader. On the left, it's hard to tell from these pictures, I know, right? They're taken with a cell phone, they're taken at night, because these guys are sneaking in here and doing these acts of sabotage. On the left is a control cabinet for a rail station in Melitopol. That's what you're seeing on the left. On the right is a tank burning that some Atesh partisans got in and doused in fuel oil and lit it on fire somewhere in Donetsk. And so these people are Ukrainians. There's some of the 4 million Ukrainians trapped inside the temporarily occupied territories under Russian control. And every day they risk their lives to fight off this invasion. It's a stunning display of courage, of a moral compass, and a dedication, a commitment to your own future that is simply lacking in anything that's coming out of this administration. Indeed the Republican Party, who is going along with Trump everywhere that we see. Now, again, it's Good Friday, and the Russians have been busy. This is an apartment block in Kyiv that was hit this morning with cluster munitions. So there was one killed here and over 50 injured. Later, we saw something similar in Dnipro. We saw attacks in Sumy where one person was killed. Altogether, overnight, it's 11 dead and 150 wounded, minimally, right? And it's likely that those numbers will rise because many of these people are in critical condition. The Russians are not taking a break for the holidays. On the contrary, it appears as though they are going to ramp things up. I think we get some other images here, but look at that. See the little pebbly spots all over the concrete? Those are the tungsten balls that come out of a cluster munition strike. In this case, it was an Iskander-K cruise missile loaded with a cluster munitions warhead that struck in Kharkiv. Same in Dnipro, killing one other there. I'm not sure what hit Sumy. Scenes of this kind of devastation are happening all over Ukraine this morning. Meanwhile, we've got, we don't have it yet, evidence that the Chinese are manufacturing weapons inside of Russia on behalf of the Russians. So apparently, China's implicit support of Russia has been transformed into active support of Russia, in that Chinese manufacturing has moved to Russia and is manufacturing weapons in Russia. Now, this is all according to Zelensky, who said, "We finally received information that China is supplying weapons to the Russian Federation. Today, we have general information from the security service, from intelligence, about gunpowder and artillery. And I think we will be able to talk about this in great detail next week," Zelensky said, according to an interview in Interfax, Ukraine. Now, the involvement of the Chinese we've known all along that implicitly the Chinese have been supporting the Russian Federation in this war. Now it appears as though Zelensky will present evidence of their active involvement in providing lethal aid to Russia. What will happen after that is unclear. Right now, China and the US are in the midst of trade wars that will put American soybean farmers out of business. It kills me because the farmers, of course, are one of Trump's biggest supporters. And it absolutely kills me how the people that voted for him are the people that are most going to be affected by what he does. Every soybean farmer in America is wringing their hands because there were no March contracts for soybeans to China. The Chinese are waiting for Brazilian soybeans instead of dealing with the Americans. Who buys 70% of the American soybean crop? You guessed it, the Chinese. And Trump's doing it on purpose. Make no mistake. He wants us all poor so that he can be God King. Now, I want to do a new thing where I welcome new members in. Everybody here became a member of the Patreon, in the last month or so, right? March or April. And, no, I'm sorry. This is about G2. Sorry, G2. I want to do that, but that's the next slide. This is about G2. G2, who's been a long-time supporter of this channel, just increased his membership, right? So he moved up a level. And I want to thank G2 for that. And frankly, I want to encourage everybody else to think about doing that too. And here's why. Well, a couple things. First, Brendan Hoy, who's been a fan of the channel for a long time, joined the Patreon. Awesome, brother. Anthony Spadaro, Edgar's Rogulis, and Kirby Grasso. I want to welcome them all to the Patreon. Thank you all so much. You guys know the Patreon is my bread and butter. It's how I survive here. Now, I have a couple comments on this that I want to talk about. The first thing that I want to say is not just welcome to all the newest members from Blue Star 6 to Kirby Grasso, but I want to thank everybody because the work, I try to do what I can here, and I couldn't do it if I didn't know the rent was paid or that I could eat. And the only way that happens is because of you guys. And so I'm deeply appreciative of this opportunity. And I hope that every month for the $5 or whatever it is you kick me, you feel like you get better information about Ukraine. Or maybe a way to do something about what's happening in Ukraine. Regardless, I appreciate all of you. And especially when somebody like G2 does what he did and shows a further commitment to this operation here. And guys, my fingers are in several pies here. I do some stuff. Okay, anyway. If you subscribe through Apple Pay, please stop. Please. Apple Pay not only takes 30% of what you pledge to me, but they make me wait 75 days to get it. It is so frustrating having, as I had last weekend, no money, and looking at the account balance and seeing that I'm owed $100 and it's being held up because Apple Pay is making interest on it. Please. And I'm an Apple fan, right? I use an iPhone, whatever. But Apple Pay and Patreon are not a good mix. So I encourage anybody who is an Apple Pay subscriber to please reevaluate if you can't just put it on a debit card or whatever. The other thing is, for all those that are genuinely interested in this channel continuing and in the further work that I might be able to do, Joey Contino put up a post that said that TikTok is shutting down in the US on Sunday, Easter Sunday. I've been unable to verify that through any other source. I don't know whether that's happening or not. And so if you're all obviously Patreon subscribers, free or paid. If you don't follow me on other channels, I am Piotr Alexievich everywhere. Blue Sky, Twitter, X, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, right? Everywhere else, I'm Piotr Alexievich. On TikTok and PayPal, I'm Peter Alexievich. If you are a free member, if TikTok is going away, boy, I sure would appreciate it if you could kick me $5 a month. If you are a free member and now look, I'm not talking to people that don't have $5 a month to spend, right? Please, if you're that person, don't feel like you have to apologize. Nobody has to apologize to me ever because they can't give me money. That's a ridiculous situation to be in. But for anybody that can help support the work that I do here, I'm deeply grateful. And I try to share with you every insight, every new thing that happens here. And I hope you have a feel for this country and why it is important to support the continued defense of Ukraine. And if you only have $5 to give, please go to United 24 and give it there. If you can afford to kick me $5 a month and it's not going to hurt you, then please, I encourage you to do so, especially now. Because if TikTok does go away, that's going to be hard for me. Right now, the Creator Rewards program pretty much pays my rent every month. And that is going to go away. Not the bills, but the rent. So anyway, deeply appreciative to everybody that supports this channel. Nobody ever has to apologize to me for anything, especially money related. If you have been a free member and you have enjoyed this content and learned from it, or derived value from it for whatever reason, please consider becoming a paid member. If you are a paid member who thinks that way, please consider maybe upping your membership if you can at this critical time. I don't know what is going to happen if TikTok goes away. I just have no idea. So I'm going to need to rethink things as that happens. And it's not going to be as simple as just going to YouTube. Though going to YouTube is probably one of the things that will happen. Alrighty, guys, thanks so much. Tonight might be our last live together, so tune in. I'll see you then.